Our dear Heavenly Father, we thank Thee so much for this opportunity we have to join through technology to learn more about our courses in BYU, Idaho. We thank Thee for the opportunity we have to gain this education that will help us strengthen our testimonies and develop abilities to sustain our families in a better way. We ask Thee that we may open our minds and hearts, that we may learn about this case, to bless the families of all our group members. And we ask these things in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
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 Okay. Anybody have a spiritual thought or something they've studied recently that they'd like to share? So I've got something that I read, one of President Nelson's talks from this past general conference yesterday. And in it, he gave a very interesting challenge. He invited the members of the church to stretch their spiritual capacity. And he just had this constant focus of finding out where we are spiritually and developing a better ability to be able to receive inspiration and feel the influence of the Holy Ghost in our lives. And it was interesting to think of it as our ability to feel the Spirit and receive revelation is a lot like exercising our physical muscles. We consciously do things to strengthen that ability, and as we do those things repeatedly, our strength in that area increases. So, and I think for myself, like one of those things that I keep on consciously thinking that I need to do is a better job of, like, when I'm praying, recording those thoughts that come and putting them down either in like my Google Calendar or on notes or something that I can go back and say, okay, did I do that? Yes, I did, or no, I didn't. Let's do that right now.
That's great.
That's cool.
Thank you.
Okay, so as a group, begin by discussing the following questions. One, summarize the situation for Quincy Apparel in December 12th. Describe the two options the founders are debating. What is at stake with this decision? Does one of you two want to start us off on that?
Well, what's at stake is if they can get more money or if they shut down. I guess that's what's, staying open is what is at stake.
Yeah. I think the two options are, it's really just the two options are, do we trim down operations enough to where we can stay open, or do we just cut our losses now, shut down, and be able to save as much of our reputation as possible in doing so?
True.
What I wrote in my assignment for today, for last night, is that to stay open, I will go with Alex Nelson idea to narrow the range of
sizing.
Yeah. I think she was right.
Yeah, I think it was causing too much production problems with the sizing and just the fact that they didn't have good people working on board, they didn't have a flow, like a bunch of people that had worked before together. So they didn't have that cohesiveness, I think, in their production line. So it was causing issues. And they would have had to totally revamped all that, I think, to get things going smoothly and to not keep bleeding money. But that's I too was like, well, I mean, I see where Wallace is coming from, but I feel like Nelson really, you have to kind of sometimes make those decisions where you're like, we've got to keep going. If we're going to keep going, we've got to cut our losses and trim everything down. And I think that was, probably the better of the two ideas. So.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat with Nelson's approach of we need to trim down the offerings to make operations easier. So I think all three of us are voting there. And it looks like we just got Tori.
Hey guys, sorry,
Hey, Tori.
I just got the email saying you're moving the time of the meeting. So I was like, oh, better get on.
Cool, Tori. Well, we just got started on talking about the voting between who was right, Wallace with trying to keep production at the same level or Nelson at trimming down operations. Which would you vote for?
I would trim down operations for sure.
Okay, that's 4 for 4.
Perfect.
So the first question with that is, how should they approach the board meeting? I think going into the board meeting, they need to just be upfront with their investors and everybody on the board of saying, hey, here's the predicament we're in. Here are the things that have got us here. We realize that we've made some mistakes, but moving forward, and then just lay out a very detailed plan of this is what we're going to do that will allow us to get through with a little bit of extra capital, will allow us to get through this next spring launch. And with that spring launch, hopefully bring in enough revenue to get us through another season.
Right.
I agree. And I know that they talked about, when they talked to their mentors, talking about like phasing out the business kind of gracefully and respectfully. And at first I was like, well, that sucks. But then I realized, like, even though they've put so much work into this, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And so there's no point in like ruining your reputation or any ideas that you might have in the future because you're like still trying to hold on to this idea. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So. Well, and I think they didn't really mitigate the risks that they were, coming across. I don't think they dealt with those very well. I think they should have done a lot more of the trunk shows that they were doing. And I think they, the problems that they were having with the sizes, I think they should have worked those out before. I think it was a great idea, but like they were saying, they were having problems with some of the fabrics, things that they just didn't know about. And the way they were hanging and they were, bunching funny or whatever. I think those things could have been learned or worked out beforehand. And I think if they would have just developed a very core business line or whatever with a few, different things, maybe, one blazer and one shirt and, one skirt or whatever, and just had it very focused and then worked on the sizing issues. I think that would have been, good, but they had so many things going on that it was causing problems. So.
Yeah, I think that's a good point of like that they could have mitigated the risk earlier. And I think that's something that we talk a little bit more later on in the discussion. So.
I totally agree with you, Tiffany. I think they could have done more of a minimum viable product. And they also could have, because like the whole case, they were just like, well, we didn't know. We didn't even think to be able to ask that. And if they had just done more testing and just slowly done it, they would have realized that a lot earlier and got rid of a lot of those kinks. I agree.
The idea of the business is great. They could have developed a great loyalty from this young professional women, and it's great. And the trunk shows they did, it was for me, it was a success. The thing is that later they found out that they couldn't have exactly the same fabric, and there's some little differences. Those things could have been avoided if they took some steps before to avoid those risks. Yeah.
I think they had a really good, product or good idea, and it obviously was growing well because of the numbers that we saw, in their sales. But like I said, if they would have mitigated that risk a little earlier on, they wouldn't have had the, and that in the production line. I think that production line was a big thing for them.
So going back to the board meeting, next question is, why should current investors make this additional loan?
Well, I think if they make the loan, that they should make it because it's a good idea. They've got a really good idea. They just need, like I said, they need to work out some of these kinks. And I think the extra funding would have helped with that. And I think it would, get them to the point where they're able to get that Series A, and, show that they're making profits and they're growing and they're doing well. So that's why I think the investors should make the loan.
Yeah, I think from my perspective at this point, if they don't make the loan, everything's going to have to be liquidated, and they're probably not going to get back what they originally invested. So they're already going at a loss. At least if they see the plans that Quincy has to improve and the potential it has, if they make a small additional loan that can carry them through the spring season, they at least still have a viable chance to recoup their losses and still even make a possible profit. So with a little bit more risk, they have a chance of actually having a return.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then, should the investors fine the founders?
I thought that was a strange question when I read that. Like, fine? Why would they fine them?
I didn't even know that was like an option.
If maybe they have something in the contract about fining them, maybe, but
or what it might just,
I don't think that would be necessary, because I think they've done their best. You cannot predict some of the things.
Yeah. I think where it says, should they fine them, that would be in reference to if they extend another loan, another bridge loan or something, what would be the conditions of that loan? Would they be the same as everything that they've done in the past, or would the investor say, okay, fine, we'll give you another loan, but in order to do this, we need another 5% stake in the company? And so they are essentially just raising what they get out of this additional loan from the standard that was already set before.
I think that's actually, now that you've explained it. Oh, go ahead. Oh, Tiffany, were you saying something, or was my mic? Is it just reverberating? Oh, sorry. I think hearing what Richard has to say, that's actually probably a really good idea for the investors, just because they could put conditions like, okay, like if you're planning to scale down your business and just like do this, then that's honestly what you have to do. If we give you this money, like you can't take it and then go all out. And so if they do, maybe they could have some repercussions that come from that, kind of just to discourage them from doing what they're already doing. I don't know if that's
encourage them to fix the problems. I think if there's a lot more at stake, but I think they kind of know that at this point, that there's a lot at stake. but yeah, they need to make sure that they're, like I said, get that cohesiveness in their production if they're going to go forward.
Because one of the co-founders still wants to continue the way they're going, pretty much.
Yeah, that's not going to work.
No. And so if I was an investor, I'd be like, yeah, you can't do that.
Did you have something you were wanting to add from the case, Jose? Or
I was looking for. Well, all right, I'm fine with that.
Okay. I saw you flipping papers. I thought maybe you had something you wanted. Okay. So, how did Quincy end up in the predicament? Do they fill a strong unmet need? What is the evidence? And does Quincy have a solid technology and operations strategy?
I think they did fill a need, an unmet need, and the evidence of that is their, sales growth, and especially the people that were return customers. They had, a pretty good section of people that were coming back and purchasing, again and again. And, I know personally, I have a friend who's a girlfriend who's 6'9", and she really has a hard time finding, clothes that fit her well. So I'm sure this idea would be, great. And I know that there's a lot of people out there that, nobody's the same, and it's really hard to find clothes. And especially if you're a professional and you want that nice look, you need to, have key things. And I think they were providing that. And that was evident in their sales that they were doing. But like I said, they had other issues with their production and all that.
And in Exhibit 7A, the last group, Feed Skeptics, they had a 85% of return. And I think Quincy was trying to focus in this segment of customers, those who need special sizes and special clothing because of the shape of their body. So I think if they had such a great return percentage, they feel like they have an unmet objective.
I think that isn't that percent returns, is that talking about like how many of them came back, or is that talking about how many returned the stuff that they ordered?
I think that's how many returned stuff that they ordered.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's what I thought it was.
Yeah, me too. So it's a lot.
Wait, what? I didn't understand the difference there. Can you say that again?
So people like return customers versus returning what you purchased. So I think the 85% were people who actually returned things that didn't fit right.
Mm-hmm. And they're from the special sizes segment of customers.
Right. But there are other people, like you say, it says orders per year, like their affluent traditionalists had, 1 to 4 orders a year, and Rising Stars had 2 to 4, yeah. And then the Trend Seekers had 1 to 2. I mean, that's pretty good.
And they have
if they focus on those people and not the fit skeptics, which would be why, if they narrowed their sizes, they're still going to be able to serve those top 3 people.
That's what I thought. And about the technology, well, they found out on page 5, they say that apparel factories don't know anything in the digital world. Production was highly dependent on personal relationships. So some part were done with technology, but some other they have to go personally to find out that they did not accomplish the date for the products to be finished, and etc. So they deal with this hard situations of not being able to use technology or use technology to receive products, and they have to do it personally. So it was kind of hard, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it was a learning curve for them for a lot of these things.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think. Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead, Tori.
I think as far as their operations go as well, it just like even in their own warehouse, there was just not a good flow to things at all. There was just constantly a battle to try and get anything made. And then the whole send it out, keep it, send it out, keep it again. It wasn't a very fluid process. So I think that if they had maybe done more of a MPV or built up some more of those customer relationships, they could have been able to figure out ways to slowly increase their operations, because their operations are struggling so much.
Yeah. So I don't think they have a solid technology and operation strategy.
No, I think
they need to really build.
Yeah. So the next question is, what did they have to do really well to succeed? And I think we've kind of touched on, well, their value proposition is built around, okay, first of all, they make products that fit well. That's like everything that they're about. And they weren't delivering on that because of a bunch of operational problems. And I think so. And then the second thing that they need to do really well, because of how they're positioning themselves of high quality products at a low price, they have to be able to produce these products at very good margins. And because their operational flow wasn't good, they were getting pretty low margins, especially with the returns. So the second thing that they need to do really well to succeed is have a very fluid, smooth operation that would minimize costs everywhere possible.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know if this is more to do with this question or maybe another one, but I noticed something in the case that I thought was kind of just would be a hard thing to live up to. So if you looked at, I'll just share my screen because it'll be easier. If I can figure out how to do it. Maybe I won't.
So you just, if you move your mouse over to the left side of the screen, a little menu option should pop up, and there's a green screen with an arrow on it.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, does that work?
Yeah. And now you just need to select which part of your screen you want. Yep, that.
Perfect. Okay, so I was looking at this exhibit.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted, so this is the price and this is the fit, obviously. So they obviously want to be a low price, but they're trying to have their fit equal to like Armani. And I feel like that's like extreme for this super low price. Like you're wanting Armani for a J. Crew price. And so, yes, their proposition is fit, but if they could even do like fit as well as like Theory fits amazing. I mean, Theory's a huge brand that's super expensive. If they could do that for like a Banana Republic J. Crew price, I feel like that's a lot more viable. And then they could probably work up to figuring out how to make things fit a little better. But going after like Armani, St. John right in the beginning, like that just feels near impossible to me. But
yeah,
I don't know. I guess that's part of the minimum viable product again, where they're just trying to do too much at once.
Mm-hmm. We have a say in Spanish.
Say again?
We have a say in Spanish that something cheap results to be more expensive at the end.
Yeah, that's true.
You buy something cheap expecting some results or some, or in this case, a good fit, and then it's not the same that you tested before, and you finish by buying another expensive garment, and you spend twice or more money than just buying the more expensive. So, like
Yeah.
George said, they have to
Quality
be,
product.
yeah,
Yeah.
well positioned.
So the next point is compare Quincy to Rent the Runway.
I think the Rent the Runway did a lot more, figuring things out and trial and error, and they kind of built up slowly where I feel like that didn't really happen with this.
I think one of the key things between Rent the Runway and Quincy is Rent the Runway knew who their suppliers and business partners in this would be, and they built really strong relationships with the designer brands.
Right.
The equivalent for Quincy would have been the manufacturers. They should have had solid relationships with the manufacturers, and they just jumped into it thinking, oh, it'll work. It'll just kind of take care of itself. I think that's the biggest difference between the two, was those business to business relationships.
And I think it talks about it in that B, the economy of scales. To get that margin, they really needed to have that going for them, and I don't think they did.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point. I think that also, oh my gosh, I just lost what I was going to say. Never mind. It's gone.
Yeah, with manufacturers and with a pattern maker, they replaced the pattern maker because he was disorganized and difficult to work with. And that's a very important position in this type of business. So loyalty.
And they were kind of disorganized and hard to work with as well. But I was going to say, I think that another difference between Rent the Runway, that was a really good point, between Richard and Jose, is that they need to build these brands, this relationships with their manufacturers. Wait, what was I going to say? Okay, hold on. So I think, sorry, Rent the Runway had better expectations of going into the market than Quincy did. Rent the Runway knew what they were getting into because they did more research, and Quincy kind of just dived in full force. But Rent the Runway knew, okay, we need this and we need this and we need this, and how are we going to make these things work? And Quincy says, this is what we want to do, let's do it, and then they figured out how to make it work.
Yeah, I think that ties back into what Tiffany brought up earlier about they should have done more of the trunk shows. They should have done more of that kind of the lean business startup of just going from small change to small change. And Rent the Runway did that with multiple different shows to narrow in on what's going to work, what isn't going to work, and how do these different factors influence our customers' responses, where Quincy just did one and then said, oh, we're good, we've got everything we need.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question, was the cash flow formula good? Looking specifically at Exhibit 6.
Exhibit 6. Are they talking about current cash flow, or are they talking about projections?
That's a good question. Let's go with projections because there's not really anything else to go off of.
Well, there's only just the one actual, but I mean, I think they have a good plan if that's what they were going, but it didn't look like they were even getting there.
Mhm.
Their actual is pretty far off their projection.
Yep. The formula is good. Getting there is the problem.
It's cash flow minus capital, right? Wait. What am I saying? Never mind.
Honestly, I feel like they were probably too optimistic
Yeah.
in their projections because, like, looking at your EBITDA in 2014, they were expecting to have an EBITDA of 8%. In 2015, their EBITDA would be 21% of their net sales. Any company that has a 21% EBITDA is doing fantastic. And they're planning on doing that after
3 years. Yeah.
3 years of operation. The next year, they're planning on jumping by another 6%. I think they were way too optimistic in the projections of what they would be able to do. And I think they were also a little too optimistic in even their sales growth.
I agree. I was like, wow, they're really jumping fast there. And I don't even know where they were getting those numbers from. I mean, obviously they're projections, but I don't know if they're just going off of what their current stuff is or if this is just what they think they can do. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so I was gonna do some math, but I think I'm gonna turn off my screen and feed my baby. So
That's fine. Okay. Next question. Were the founders a good fit?
I think they were a good fit because I think just because they were good friends and they balanced each other out pretty well. It seems like each had a good thing, good thing going in each area, but I don't know that they had enough. Like, I feel like they needed some more experience, and a couple more people would have probably brought that to them. But just on their own, I don't think it's, it worked. So.
Yeah, and they knew that if something went wrong and they were and they had Alex, I think it was Alex, where they can go and complain about Christina.
Yeah.
And they were talking about in public in front of their employees about why you didn't talk to me about this decision, and I don't think this is the best thing. And some things, even though they were very close friends and they talked about that no business issues will affect their friendship, they have to be more cautious in this type of things with employees and maturity.
I agree, Jose. I feel like if you have to run down to the coffee shop to fight all the time, that's not quite a good good partnership.
Coffee,
Yeah. And I think no, never mind. I just agree with Jose completely.
Yeah, I feel like they could have been a good fit. Their skills could have complemented each other well. I think the problem is they just didn't establish a proper culture for themselves and therefore for the rest of the company, because their priorities were, hey, no matter what, we're going to maintain a good friendship, which is good and important, but the first priority needs to be in having a successful business, and that's going to, and not, rather than, hey, we're not going to step on each other's toes. And because they didn't establish that priority of, we're going to be able to have the hard conversations and step on each other's toes a little bit if we need to make this work. And I think that kind of trickled down into the rest of the organization because they didn't set a good example of being able to have those hard conversations and be able to make sacrifice and decisions. The people below them, when something went wrong, they weren't willing to bring it up. They weren't willing to bring up those hard discussions about, hey, this isn't working and it needs to be fixed.
I think the investors had the right idea when they said, you need to have one person have like the CEO and one be the COO. And they did that just to appease them, but yet they didn't actually do it. So they thought that they could just agree on everything. And I feel like that just takes more time. And like, if you need to get something done, which they need to do often, is just to get things done, that instead of just like figuring it out and doing what needs to be done, they had to go into their, well, not their office, into the coffee shop and like hash things out for a couple hours and then go back out and get it done. And that's just not how a business is run.
Right. And I think that the whole prospect of them, not letting things go, like if that's not what you're asked to do, why do you have to have your hands in everything? I mean, I get that you're a founder, but when you kind of separate those positions, you really need to separate them. And like they were talking about the people coming to them and complaining, if they, come to you and complain, I would turn it back on them and say, well, have you talked to them about it? And they weren't doing those kind of things. And just, they were getting upset when decisions were being made without them. And you can't do that in a business. Like I said, I get that they're co-founders, but if they have a position, they need to delegate those things and feel comfortable with that delegation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How about the team and the investors and partners? Were they a good fit?
I don't think the team was a good fit. That was obvious with the production. They were having all sorts of problems. And then the investors and partners, I mean, they had so much family involved that it became an issue, I think. But I don't think the team worked well together, though.
I think another problem with the team is one of the things it says in the case is they hired some really good talent who viewed working at Quincy as almost like they were doing Quincy a favor.
A favor, yeah.
Which is a terrible formula. Anybody that you want on your team and in your business, you want them to be there because they feel like this is a fantastic opportunity and not oh, hey, I'm doing this because I'm a nice person. Because the person with that attitude is going to, anything they do, they're going to feel like is enough. Where somebody who truly believes in the business that they're working for, they will give their all to try and make it successful.
Yeah.
So true.
They will be committed.
Yeah, they really needed to get their team like on board. Like I said, I think they needed to probably like revamp that whole who they had working for them and all that stuff probably needed to be changed if it was going to work.
Yeah. I think that also the team might have worked better if the culture was different.
Right.
like we talked about before. Because I mean, I highly doubt that everyone you hire, I mean, granted, if they think it's a service to work there, that's not good. But like everyone you hire shouldn't have a problem. I think it's more of how they're training and how they're using and their people and their culture. That's escalating these problems and making them more of a big deal than they should be, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
So the last question on this section, if you had 6 months more cash, could you fix Quincy? Honestly, I don't know if you could effectively fix Quincy at this point, and my argument there would go back to the idea of the culture that we've been talking about. I feel like the culture's already been established a little bit, and to change the culture of a team in 6 months under pressure is going to be quite a challenge. I feel like you'd more have to scrap the team and start over with a new team and rebuild a new culture. And ultimately, the culture is going to be dependent on the co-founders. So unless they very quickly figure out what they need to adjust to make it work between them, they're just bringing in a new team is going to bring about the same problems that they already had.
I agree.
I wonder if how their investors would feel, because I know this probably wouldn't be a popular decision, if they've super scaled back their business. And I know that's against, you want money for your investors. But like if they went back and got rid of a bunch of team members, did a minimum viable project, like kind of minimum viable, you guys know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Know what you're talking about.
Yeah. But if they totally scaled back and kind of restarted from the very beginning, and did all the things that they should have been doing from the beginning, if they could make a difference in 6 months where they could start scaling up again. And if they had 6 months of money now and then they did that, I mean, it would obviously last a lot longer because they're spending a lot less. And just kind of do some like market tests and making sure that they can like fix those. Oh my gosh, Tiffany, what did you call it? Their risks. They could get rid of some of those risks.
Mitigate the risk.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know that they could do it in 6 months. I think you could you could do it, but I don't think they could do it in 6 months. That's just my take.
I think one of the problems with this is all dependent on can they scale back. And the problem is now that they have investors, scaling back isn't really an option anymore. I think this is something that kind of going back to a lesson we learned in Cake Financial.
Mm-hmm.
Once you make an investment or receive an investment, you're on the clock to get a return. And the investors invested a certain amount expecting that the scale of the business that you pitched them is going to work. And anything less than that will be a failure in their eyes, and it's not going to receive further investment. So I feel like even if they had 6 months, scaling back in the eyes of the investors would be a failure, and they wouldn't be able to get further funding. They'd have to be independent from that point on. So because they started big, going smaller isn't really an option for them anymore, where they're no longer independent.
And the more money they invest, the sooner they want to get it back, like we read. And also about the 6 month thing, at the end of the case, it says that Alex and I weren't agreeing on the vision, and I knew that even if we raised more money, half our team had to go. What was I fighting for? And like Richard said, to have a new culture, we will need a new team. And 6 months of more money, will not make that difference.
Okay, so moving on to the next point, which involves the B case. Tori, have you had a chance to read the B case yet?
I have not. Sorry.
Okay. Why don't you go ahead and pop that open and scan through it? But the question is, was Quincy doomed from the beginning, and what might they have done differently?
Have you guys already read it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
each of us already read it.
Oh, sorry.
You're fine. Do you just want to, because we're a little short on time, do you just want to mute a story, scan through it, and then you can just jump back in once you've read it?
Yep. Sounds
Okay,
good.
sweet. So for the other three of us, were they doomed from the beginning? What do you guys think?
I don't think we were doomed from the beginning. If they had focused in one or two pieces of garment and keep it producing in different colors, different patterns, and then expand the garments designs, maybe in the next year they would have done like a great business, I think.
I agree. I think they could have made it work with the size thing, but like I said, they needed to have it really focused. And like Jose was saying, just focus on a couple of key items. In business attire, you only need to really have a couple of really good things, and then your blouses or your skirt, you can kind of accessorize and change it up a little bit. So if they had that good core and focused on that, I think they could have done the sizing thing. But like they said in the case B, with the merchant, they should have outsourced all that stuff, and tried to bring in different things. I think they could, like, if they would have started small, they could have built it up. But the way they did it, I think that was doomed from the beginning. The way they set it up, I don't think they could have succeeded. But like I said, I think they could have if they would have done just that focus. And I think they would have known that if they would have done a little bit more research and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think, and they ask this same type of question a lot in our discussions, and a lot of the answer hinges on, well, what is the beginning? What do you define as the beginning?
Right.
But I really like what you said, Tiffany, about if we consider like the business model that they were using when they accepted their the first round of investment. Yeah, I think they were doomed because they just hadn't developed the idea enough. In earlier readings, we found out that most companies pivot 4, 5, 6 times before they really find what they're actually going to do long term. And from my perspective, I think Quincy only really pivoted once. It wasn't a big pivot, and it was a pivot to just make their sizing and everything more complex, which was a step in the wrong direction. They didn't take enough time to find out what pivots they needed to make to really match what the market needed with the right operations.
Yep.
So the next question is, what might they have done differently?
Like I said, I in the reading, it talked about them doing, the trunk shows more. And, testing the fabrics and stuff like that. If they had that core thing where they, had the really good fit on, 2 or 3 different items and had all that, outsourced, so they weren't worrying about all that, the production end of it, they could have done, I think they could have done it, and then built from there, have those core products and then grow with it and change with it. But they really didn't do that. So.
Yeah.
You done, Tori?
Yep.
Okay, you want to jump in on discussing what might they have done differently?
Yeah, I think when I was reading it, they actually touched on a lot of things that we've been talking about the whole time. Doing the trunk shows, minimum viable project. Why can I not say that? Their MVP. So I think just a lot of it was in there, but they also had a couple other points that I hadn't thought about before, just in like the fact of like having like a 49-51 split. I thought would have been really valuable just to have that little extra something where they could have split those decisions a little bit better and figured that out. I don't know, and have someone be like the head of the company a little bit more. What else did they talk about? Getting your family involved in business is never a good idea, I don't think. I don't know. There's just a lot. Most of the things that we'd already talked about, though. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I missed what you guys said, though. So.
Yeah, I feel like we've already had a lot of discussion on what they could have done differently, mostly on like just getting things started with more of a lean business model with more testing and hypothesizing. So next question is, what are your top 3 takeaways? I think it would be easier if we all just share kind of what our top takeaway is. Who wants to start?
I think something that I never thought of before, that they talked about in the Plan B case, was hiring super experienced people might not be the best for your team, which kind of blew my mind a little bit. But it makes sense that they're used to just doing what they're told and just getting it done instead of being able to like tell you about their experiences. And so I think you need to find someone that fits your team dynamic a little bit better, that's willing to go the extra mile for your company. And
well, and if you find like a up and coming designer that just wants a break and wants, to be able to do it, they're like, wow, I'm getting this great chance, and they're willing to do, I think in the thing they talked about how some of the production line, like it would go from one person to the next, and there'd be a problem, and it wasn't my problem, it was somebody else's problem, that kind of a attitude with their people in their production line. And if they had, maybe younger people that were up and coming doing that, they would have gone, hey, what can I do to fix this? There's a problem. And they probably wouldn't have been so standoffish with reporting those problems to the founders and saying, hey, I've come across this problem. And so I think that the communication all around really needed to be better, and it kind of needed to start with the two of them. But I think we already talked about that too. But that's my biggest takeaway, is the communication and coming up with, a better. They needed to have people on board that saw the vision and really had the desire that they had to make it work.
Instead of a culture of like fear, they could have done a culture of like communication and working together and made it more of a team, instead of right now they're kind of over like the throw it over the wall mentality where I've done my thing, now it's your turn.
Yeah.
I think my biggest takeaway is just the idea of continually testing and improving the product before you actually make your official launch to market. And we've seen several examples of that in past cases of people who took their time and did it great, and people who just went way too fast and drove themselves into the ground. I think this one just kind of hammers that in for me of you need to take the time with your MVPs and make sure that you have something that's really ready to meet what the customers actually need and want.
My biggest takeaway will be I feel so sorry for them because they did a good job in the trunk shows, but then they had these increasing prices that they mentioned when they couldn't find the same fabric. And even though the customers were forgiven, they work hard to establish a personal relationship. But I think that preparedness is the biggest takeaway that I have. Make sure if they probably were buying cheaper fabrics to keep the prices low, maybe they will have to consider buying a more expensive fabric, but to give customers what they need always the same way. And if buying a more expensive fabric will get the prices similar to the competition, well, they have to improve in other things so customers will prefer them instead of Armani or Theory or other competition. But preparedness, and that was my takeaway.
Perfect. And I think so. Just as a summary, we all are in agreement that the
Danny, you didn't get the meeting time change either, did you?
No, I didn't. I thought I was at 10.
Okay. So we're just wrapping up the discussion. Not a problem. So for the group assignments, the big question is what decision should they make? And then the questions are, what caused the failure of Quincy Apparel? What should the founders have done differently that might have led to success? And to apply the principles of the business model analysis to help you explain which parts of the business model needed to change. And apply hypothesis-driven entrepreneurship to develop a list of recommended actions that could have reversed the company's fortunes. I think probably the best way for us to tackle this would for each of us. So I guess, Danny, what are your thoughts on what Quincy should have done to be more successful from the beginning?
Yeah, no, my thinking was that they should have done a little bit of more hypothesis-driven testing initially, because they did quite a bit where they went out, they got good feedback, but they didn't test out their processes, and I think their procedures of getting the product out, they had no idea how it would work initially, and when they got going, they couldn't, they would send it to them to be, kind of made and created, but sometimes these places would get rush orders from larger companies, and their company would put on the back burner. And so I think that's something that they should have kind of figured out before they really decided, okay, this is what we're going to do, and go launch it. And I think kind of doing a little bit more hypothesis-driven testing could have helped them work out some kinks and help them kind of figure out their processes of how they can get their product to the customers, what channels they could use. But I think that's a big thing that they could have done earlier on before they went so big so fast.
Okay, agreed. So I'm gonna make a Google Doc for this.
Okay, before we go, can we decide on a time for next week so that we don't have, because I just feel bad for Danny coming in at the end here.
Yeah, no, I didn't. I thought it said 10 a.m.
Well, the email that got sent out on Tuesday said, hey, would we all be able to do 9 to 10 a.m.?
Oh, 9 to
Yeah. But we talked about 10 last time we were on here. So
Danny, what I did when I couldn't attend the meeting is that I got all the questions from that we have to discuss during the meeting, and then summarize what you guys said about it, and then what I have will be my input. So, and that helped me to get the participation rate.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe that.
So I just think like if we just pick a time and try and stick with a little more, and maybe if we change it just to make sure that everyone's on board. I guess I don't ever check this email until it's time for this is just like my email I use for you guys pretty much. So
Would you rather us use a different thread that has a better email for you, Tori? Or
well, I don't know. And I mean it wasn't it's not a problem. I just don't, I just want Danny to get full point. All of us to be able to get full points all the time,
And I apologize. I had something come up to where I couldn't meet at the normal time that we
Right.
had established for the weeks.
Yeah.
No,
Sorry, I'm not trying to point the finger at anyone, but
it was all my fault. I misread that. I thought we were switching it from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Not meeting from 9 to 10, like for that hour. So I misread that email. That was all my fault.
Okay. So does 10 a.m. work for going back to 10 a.m. work for everybody next week?
My schedule is about to get crazy. I start an internship, so.
Oh yeah.
Have you heard back about anything about that so far?
I start Monday at 9, so that's the only schedule I know so far. So I'm sure I'll get a schedule.
Okay.
So did you talk to your instructor and find out if you could switch to a different group or?
Yeah, I'm gonna email today and just let them know my situation and see what I can do.
Okay. Well, then I guess in that case, let's just all just keep I'll just keep a better eye on that email, and we'll just check it every day and then communicate better.
Okay. Let's see. So I looked at the schedule from past weeks. We had been meeting. We were meeting at 9:30 originally.
Mm-hmm.
Does that work best to plan for next week for everybody, or would we want to choose a different time?
9:30 or 10, it works perfect for me.
Yeah,
it works for me too.
9:30 fine.
So let's plan on 9:30 next week, and then let's see. I think who would be leading out next week?
I think Danny, have you done one yet?
I just did it last week.
Oh, that's right. Then I think it's my turn.
Okay. So
I'm the last one, I think.
Yeah. And then Tori, do you just want to kind of send out like a reminder on Tuesday and see if anything needs to be made, any adjustments need to be made time-wise?
Yeah. That
Okay.
sounds perfect.
Sweet.
And then
So
hopefully Danny will know his schedule a little bit better.
yeah, and we can make adjustments accordingly if we need to for Danny.
Danny, would it be possible for you to maybe meet before work if you work at 9 o'clock?
It could, but that's I'm on the East Coast, so it's 9 a.m. So it's 7 a.m. for you guys.
Oh, gotcha.
I don't have any problem with that. I'm good with morning stuff, so. And I'm on the Pacific Coast, so I'm 3 hours different from Danny.
Yeah. We'll figure it out. I'm like, you don't worry about me right now. I'm gonna talk to the professor and see what I can work out, and just say, hey, I'm starting this internship, and then I'll figure out my schedule on Monday, and we'll get it all worked out.
Okay.
Let us know.
Will do. Sorry about my misreading that email.
It's fine. We all do it. So for the just wrapping up for the group assignment, I think what would probably be best, since we're all in agreement that they need to scale down, I think what would be best is if we all just choose a different aspect of like the business model or something that they need to do and write about that and provide some evidence on what they needed to change to be more successful from the beginning. I've written down each of our names so we can just write in whatever each of us want to talk about, basically just sign up for it.
Okay.
Now, in terms of submitting this, my Saturday is packed. I have no free time on Saturday. So if you guys want me to kind of sum it all up and submit it, I can do that. I just need everybody's submissions by Friday around 4 o'clock. Or if we still want to do one on Saturday, if somebody else could edit it up, which would you guys prefer?
I can edit it if we need to do it on Saturday, but I'm good with doing it on Friday. So,
is everybody good submitting by Friday?
I'm fine with Friday.
Yeah, that should be fine.
Okay. Sweet. So if you guys want to eat, if we can all have our parts in by Friday at 4 o'clock, I'll just sum it all together and get it submitted Friday evening.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Sounds good.
And then, real quick, can you just what did you guys decide which offer they should take? I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
So what we summarized was that they should trim down their operations and try and get a small bridge loan based off of those trimmed down operations to get them through the next season.
Okay, well, that's what I was thinking. So perfect. All right, sweet.
And then Dan, you can always go and watch the other video too, so you can kind of like feed off whatever we said too.
For
yeah.
Sure.
And Tiffany, will you be able to send out the link to all of us?
Yeah. For next week?
Sorry, for this video.
The recording.
Oh, yeah.
The recording.
Yeah, I'll do it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Good job today, everybody, and we'll see you around.
All right. See ya.
Yeah.
Yeah.